No one at that wedding noticed the woman standing at the edge of the vineyard. She wasn't the bride. She wasn't the center of attention. She was the sister. People smiled at politely, then forgot. What they didn't know was this: by the end of the night, she would vanish. Not because she ran away, not because of an accident, but because someone had already chosen her. When the man walked in, the laughter didn't stop out of joy. It stopped out of fear. He didn't scan the crowd. He didn't hesitate. His eyes locked onto hers, like he had been searching for her long before this night. People whispered his name and then went silent. Someone backed away without understanding why. And the woman who had spent her whole life being invisible realized something terrifying. The most dangerous man in the room hadn't come for the wedding. He had come for her. And once he chose her, there would be no going back. The first thing Ava noticed was not the music, or the white roses climbing over the stone arches, or the way the late afternoon sun painted everything in a forgiving gold. It was the familiar sensation of being slightly misplaced, like a word written neatly in the wrong sentence. She stood at the edge of her sister's wedding, fingers curled around a small clutch, wearing a pale green dress tailored with careful precision. The fabric fell softly over her right side, artfully designed to hide what had been missing for years. It did its job well enough. People saw elegance first. Then, inevitably, they noticed the absence. And then they looked away. No one stared for long. That would have been rude. Instead, they offered brief glances, polite smiles, the kind that passed over her like a gentle draft before disappearing. Ava had learned to accept those smiles without mistaking them for warmth. Since the accident at 19, she had lived by a simple rule: do not make others uncomfortable by existing too loudly. It was easier that way. Safer. The wedding was beautiful, painfully so. White flowers spilled over every surface. Wine glasses chimed with soft laughter, and the air hummed with celebration. Amber, her younger sister, stood at the center of it all, radiant and effortless, as though the day itself had been waiting years for her arrival. Light clung to her gown, to her smile, to the way people leaned toward her without thinking. Ava watched from the side, not with jealousy, but with a quiet awareness that she did not belong in the frame of this picture. She was not unhappy for her sister. She simply felt like a guest who had wandered into someone else's life and learned too late that there was no place prepared for her. "You're so strong," someone murmured as they passed. "So brave," another added, their voice laced with sympathy. The words slid past Ava without leaving a mark. She had heard them too many times for them to sting anymore. Strength, bravery, resilience, people used them the way they used flowers at funerals, as offerings meant to soften their own discomfort. Ava nodded, smiled when required, and positioned herself just far enough from the crowd to avoid conversation. She told herself she would leave early. She always did. She was just about to step away when something shifted. At first, it was subtle, almost imperceptible. The laughter thinned. Conversations faltered mid-sentence. Even the music seemed to hesitate, as if the air itself had been asked to hold its breath. Ava felt it before she understood it, a tightening in her chest that made her lift her head. At the far end of the courtyard, the large doors opened. A man stepped inside. He did not rush. He did not pause to take in the scene or look for someone to greet. He moved with an unhurried certainty, the kind that did not seek permission because it had never learned the habit. His dark suit was perfectly cut, his presence quiet but commanding, like a storm contained within a single body. He did not announce himself. He did not need to. People noticed, not because he was loud, but because something about him altered the space around him. Guests shifted instinctively, making room without knowing why. A few smiles froze in place. Someone near the bar set their glass down a little too carefully. Ava watched the ripple move through the crowd, confusion giving way to something sharper unease, recognition, fear. The man's gaze lifted. He did not scan the courtyard. He did not search aimlessly among the faces. His eyes moved with intention, cutting through the space between bodies and flowers, and whispered judgments, until they found her. And then they stopped. The moment stretched thin and strange. Ava's fingers tightened around her clutch. She told herself it was coincidence, that she only felt exposed because she was unused to being looked at directly. But the look did not flicker. It did not soften. It held her with a focus that made the rest of the world feel unreal, as though she were the only solid thing left standing. Her heart began to race. She had spent years perfecting the art of invisibility, of blending into the background so thoroughly that people forgot she had been there at all. Yet now, under that steady gaze, she felt unmistakably seen, not observed, not assessed, seen. It unsettled her more than pity ever had. The man started toward her. Each step he took seemed to quiet the space around him. Conversations fell away. Heels stopped clicking against stone. Ava became acutely aware of how alone she stood, how exposed she was at the edge of the celebration. She considered stepping back, disappearing into the safety of the crowd, but her body refused to move. Something in her held still, caught between instinct and curiosity. He stopped in front of her, up close. The calm in his expression was almost unnerving. His eyes were sharp, controlled, but there was nothing cruel in them. If anything, they held a restrained intensity, as though he were constantly measuring the distance between restraint and action. He looked at her the way someone looked at a place they had memorized long ago. "Sorry I'm late," he said quietly. His voice was low, steady, unapologetic. Traffic was unforgiving. The words were ordinary. The effect was not. He placed a hand at her back, not possessive, not hesitant, just firm enough to ground her, to declare something without speaking it aloud. Ava felt the warmth of his palm through the fabric of her dress, real and undeniable. The courtyard seemed to exhale all at once. People stared openly now. Amber turned, her radiant smile faltering as her eyes moved from the man to Ava and back again. "Ava," she said lightly, though the effort showed, "you didn't say you were bringing someone." Ava opened her mouth, then closed it again. She did not know what to say. She did not know who this man was, or why he was standing beside her as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He answered for her. "I wanted to be here with her." That was all. No explanation. No apology. It was enough. A murmur passed through the guests, quick and nervous. Ava felt the weight of their attention press in from all sides. For the first time, it was not her absence that drew their eyes, but her presence. The shift made her dizzy. She had spent so long shrinking herself that she did not know how to occupy this much space. She turned slightly toward the man, lowering her voice. "You didn't have to do this." He looked down at her then, really looked at her, as if confirming something only he could see. "I know," he said simply. "I chose to." The words settled deep, stirring something Ava had long kept buried. Chosen, not tolerated, not included out of kindness. Chosen, deliberately, in front of everyone. Around them, whispers began to sharpen. A name was spoken too softly. Someone else went quiet too quickly. Ava sensed it then, the way fear threaded through the curiosity, the way distance crept into the air. Whatever world this man belonged to, it was not a gentle one. And by standing beside her so openly, he had altered something fundamental. She realized, with a sudden clarity that made her chest tighten, that this was not a coincidence. He had not wandered into the wrong wedding. He had not mistaken her for someone else. He had come for her. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it made her pulse race with a feeling she could not immediately name. Hope, perhaps, or the dangerous thrill of being seen after a lifetime of being overlooked. As the music hesitantly resumed and the guests pretended to return to celebration, Ava stood very still, his hand steady at her back. Somewhere deep inside, something shifted, fragile and irreversible. She did not know who he was. She did not know what he wanted. But she knew this, with a certainty that unsettled her more than fear ever could. The woman who had lived her life at the edges had just been pulled into the center. And nothing, she sensed, would ever be the same again. If this story touched your heart, follow the channel to enjoy many more heart-stirring stories every week. The music returned, but it sounded thinner now, as if it had lost confidence. Laughter followed, delayed and uncertain, the way people laughed when they sensed something had shifted but did not yet know how to react. Ava stood where she was, acutely aware of the hand at her back and the sudden gravity of being noticed. It was not admiration she felt from the crowd. It was assessment, measurement, as though everyone were trying to understand why someone like him would choose someone like her. The man beside her seemed unaffected. He did not withdraw his hand, nor did he tighten it. The touch remained steady, an anchor rather than a claim. Ava realized, with a flicker of disbelief, that he was not performing. Whatever he was doing, it was deliberate, and that unsettled her more than spectacle ever could. Amber approached again, glass in hand, her smile practiced to perfection. Up close, Ava could see the tension beneath it, the faint tightening at the corners of her eyes. "I hope you're enjoying the wedding," Amber said brightly, directing the words toward the man while glancing at Ava for reassurance she did not receive. He inclined his head, polite but distant. "It's beautiful." The answer was neutral, impossible to argue with, and yet it gave nothing away. Amber hesitated, then laughed softly. "I don't think we've been introduced." "No," he agreed. He did not offer his name. A brief, awkward silence settled between them before Amber excused herself, drawn back into the orbit of guests who still expected her to shine. Ava watched her go, a familiar ache settling in her chest. For years, she had learned to live in her sister's shadow without resentment. Tonight, however, that shadow felt different. Thinner, as if it no longer quite reached her. "You can step away if you want," Ava said quietly. "You don't owe me anything." He turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "I know." "Then why?" "Because you look like you're about to disappear," he said, cutting her off gently. "And I didn't want you to." The simplicity of the statement left her momentarily speechless. Ava looked down, swallowing the sudden tightness in her throat. No one had ever said something like that to her before, not without a layer of pity attached. This felt different, dangerous. Even, they began to move through the courtyard together, not toward the center of attention, but along its edges. Ava noticed how people shifted as they passed, how conversations stalled, how some guests avoided looking at them altogether. A man near the bar stiffened visibly, setting his drink down and turning his body away. A woman whispered something too quickly, her eyes darting between Ava and the man at her side. "Do they know you?" Ava asked. "They know of me," he replied. That answer chilled her. "That doesn't sound reassuring. It isn't meant to be." They stopped near a row of stone pillars draped in white roses. From here, Ava could see most of the reception without being fully surrounded by it. The space felt quieter, heavier. She was about to speak again when she noticed someone watching them. The man stood a short distance away, tall and sharply dressed. His posture relaxed in a way that felt calculated. His gaze did not flicker when Ava met it. He smiled, slow and deliberate, as if they shared a private understanding. The man beside Ava noticed immediately. His body shifted, subtle but unmistakable, placing himself half a step closer to her. "Who is that?" Ava asked under her breath. "Someone who shouldn't be here," he said. Before she could ask more, the man approached. His smile widened, but his eyes remained cold. "I didn't expect to see you in a place like this," he said casually. "Especially not at a wedding." The man at Ava's side met his gaze without flinching. "You always expect too much." Ava sensed the tension snap into place between them, sharp and electric. The air felt tighter, as though the night itself were listening. The newcomer's eyes slid back to Ava, lingering in a way that made her skin prickle. "And you brought her," he observed. "That's bold. Leave," came the reply, calm and final. The man chuckled under his breath. "Still giving orders? Some habits die hard." Whispers rippled through the nearby guests, quick and uneasy. Ava caught fragments of conversation, half-remembered stories, names spoken too softly to be confirmed. She did not understand any of it, but she understood the fear. It moved like a current beneath the surface, invisible yet undeniable. The man stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You chose mercy once. People paid for it." Ava felt the words land like a blow. Mercy, chose, paid. None of it made sense, and yet it all felt terribly real. "Do not speak to her," the man beside Ava said, his voice still controlled but edged with something darker. The stranger smiled again, satisfied. "You see," he said lightly, "you still have weaknesses. For a heartbeat." Ava thought something terrible would happen right there among the roses and linen. Instead, the man backed away, hands raised in mock surrender. "Enjoy the evening," he added. "While you can." He melted back into the crowd, leaving behind a silence that pressed in from all sides. Ava exhaled shakily, only then realizing she had been holding her breath. "Are you going to tell me what that was about?" she asked. "Not here," he replied. "That's what everyone keeps saying," Ava said softly. "Not here? Not now." He looked at her then, really looked at her. And for the first time, she saw conflict flicker across his composed exterior. "This place isn't safe for the truth." The words sent a shiver through her. Ava glanced around the vineyard, at the flowers and lights and smiling faces that now felt like a carefully constructed illusion. She had come here expecting a simple discomfort, an evening of being overlooked. She had not expected danger, or secrets, or a man whose past seemed to follow him like a shadow. "And if I don't want to pretend anymore," she asked. He hesitated, just long enough to make her heart sink. "Then you shouldn't stay here." Ava straightened, something resolute settling in her chest. "Then neither should you." His gaze softened, and for a moment, the tension between them eased. But the sense of foreboding did not lift. Somewhere in the crowd, Eyes watched them with renewed interest. The night pressed forward, thick with unspoken consequences. Ava did not know it yet, but the choice to remain standing beside him had already set events in motion. Whatever world he came from had noticed her now. And once noticed, there would be no returning to the safety of the shadows. The longer Ava stood beside him, the more she understood that fear did not always announce itself loudly. It lived in the smallest reactions, in the way conversations bent away from them, in the way laughter resumed a second too late, in the way certain guests chose different paths across the courtyard, as if instinct had whispered a warning they did not dare explain. She felt it in herself, too. Not panic, but a growing awareness that something irrevocable had already begun. They moved again, slowly, along the outer edge of the reception. He guided her without steering, always half a step behind her shoulder, close enough that his presence felt intentional, but never restrictive. Ava noticed how his attention never fully left the space around them. He did not scan nervously, yet nothing escaped him. It was the vigilance of someone who had learned long ago that danger rarely arrived unannounced. "You're watching everything," she said quietly. "I have to," he replied. "Because of him?" she asked, meaning the man who had approached earlier. Yes, she waited for more, but the silence stretched. Ava exhaled, steadying herself. "People are afraid of you," she said, not curious. Afraid. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "They confuse fear with understanding. That doesn't answer the question." "No," he agreed. "It doesn't." They stopped near the edge of the vineyard where the lights softened into shadows. From here, the wedding looked distant, almost unreal, like a carefully staged illusion that could collapse at any moment. Ava leaned against a stone pillar, grounding herself, and turned to face him fully. "I need to know what I'm standing next to," she said, "because right now, it feels like I walked into something without choosing it." He studied her for a long moment, as if weighing the cost of honesty against the risk of silence. When he spoke, his voice was lower than before. "You chose it the moment you didn't step away." The words unsettled her, not because they were accusatory, but because they were true. Ava swallowed. "Then tell me the truth." Before he could answer, movement at the edge of her vision drew her attention. The man from earlier had reappeared, though he did not approach this time. He stood among a small group of guests, his posture relaxed, his eyes sharp and fixed unmistakably on them. Ava felt a chill trace her spine. "He's watching." "I know. What does he want?" He did not respond immediately. His gaze hardened, something colder slipping into place. "To remind me of what I was." And what was that? Someone who believed loyalty mattered more than mercy. The sentence landed heavily, full of implications Ava did not yet understand. She opened her mouth to ask more when the man broke away from the group and began to approach again. This time, there was no pretense of casual interest. He stopped a few steps away, his smile thin. "You're still here," he remarked, eyes flicking pointedly to Ava. "I thought you'd have the sense to leave. Not everyone enjoys running," came the calm reply. The man laughed softly, still pretending you can control outcomes. His gaze returned to Ava, lingering. "Do you know what people used to call him?" Ava's chest tightened. "Stop." "He doesn't want you to hear it," the man continued, ignoring her protest. "He thinks it will scare you away." "Enough," the other man said, his voice quiet but edged with warning. The stranger tilted his head. Or what? For a moment, the world seemed to narrow to the space between the two men. Ava felt the tension coil, tight and dangerous, like a wire drawn too far. She had the strange, vivid sense that whatever held them apart was not courtesy, but restraint. A voice from nearby broke the silence. Trembling. Marcus. The name rippled through the air, instantly swallowed by an unnatural quiet. Conversations stopped. Someone set a glass down too quickly. Ava felt the shift like a pressure change. Marcus smiled, clearly pleased. "Ah, so people still remember?" Ava turned to the man beside her. "Is that his name?" "Yes. And yours?" she asked. For the first time since he had entered the wedding, he hesitated. Not long, but enough to matter. "Ethan?" The name did not carry through the crowd the way Marcus's had, but the reaction was immediate. Several guests stiffened. A man near the bar turned pale. A woman murmured something and pulled her companion closer. Ava's pulse quickened. Names had power here. She could feel it. Marcus stepped back, spreading his hands in mock surrender. "I won't ruin the wedding," he said lightly. "Not tonight." His eyes never left Ava's face. "Just be careful," he added. People like him don't bring others into their world unless they're prepared to lose them. With that, he retreated once more, disappearing into the crowd like a shadow slipping behind glass. Ava released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her legs felt unsteady. Ethan shifted closer, his hand hovering near her back without touching. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what she asked. For pulling you into this." Ava shook her head slowly. "You didn't pull me. You stood next to me. There's a difference." He looked at her, surprised, and something softer crossed his features. "Most people don't see it that way." "I'm not most people," she said quietly. They stood together in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken truths pressing in from all sides. Ava felt a strange duality inside her fear. Yes, but also a flicker of resolve she had not felt in years. Being invisible had protected her once. Tonight, it felt like a liability. "I don't know what you're involved in," she said at last. "But I know this isn't just about you and him." "No," Ethan admitted. "It isn't. And I know," she continued, meeting his gaze, "that if I walk away now, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what I was too afraid to face." His eyes searched hers, as if looking for doubt. Finding none seemed to steady him. "Then stay close," he said quietly. "And if things change, if this becomes too much, I'll decide that." Ava said. A faint smile touched his lips, brief but genuine, around them. The wedding carried on, fragile and strained, pretending nothing had cracked beneath its surface. Ava knew better now. The night had shifted, and so had she. Whatever Ethan's past held, whatever danger followed his name, she sensed one undeniable truth settling into place. The man called Marcus was not finished. And by choosing not to disappear, Ava had placed herself directly in the path of what came next. As the night pressed forward, the wedding regained its rhythm, but it felt forced, like a performance everyone had silently agreed to finish. Music played again, softer now, and laughter returned in careful bursts. Ava remained beside Ethan, aware that the space around them had subtly widened. People no longer brushed past her by accident. They watched. They measured. They wondered. She felt it in the way conversations stalled when she approached, then resumed the moment she moved away. The attention no longer felt like pity. It felt sharper, edged with calculation. Ava had lived her whole life avoiding being noticed. Now that she was, she realized how exposed that attention could be. "You're thinking too loudly," Ethan said under his breath. She glanced at him. "Is that something people can do?" "With practice," he replied. They stood near a long table of untouched champagne glasses, the bubbles inside catching the light. Ava picked one up, more for something to hold than because she wanted a drink. Her hand trembled slightly, and she hated herself for it. "Do you regret coming?" she asked. "No," Ethan said without hesitation. She nodded, absorbing the certainty in his voice. "I don't know if I do," she admitted, "but I don't regret staying." He looked at her then, and for a fleeting moment the guarded calm slipped, replaced by something warmer, almost vulnerable. Before either of them could speak, a woman approached hesitantly. She wore an expensive dress and a polite smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "I just wanted to say," the woman began, glancing nervously at Ethan before focusing on Ava. "You must be very special." The word landed strangely, unfamiliar in this context. Ava opened her mouth to respond, but Ethan spoke first. "She is..." The woman swallowed, nodded quickly, and retreated without another word. Ava stared after her, her heart pounding. "People don't usually say that about me," she murmured. "They should," Ethan said simply. Before Ava could respond, a careless laugh cut through the air nearby. A man, flushed with wine and confidence, spoke too loudly to his companion. What kind of man walks into a wedding uninvited and expects everyone to accept it? The words carried farther than intended. The courtyard stilled once more. Ava felt the familiar heat of embarrassment rise, the instinctive urge to shrink, to apologize for a situation she had not created. Ethan turned slowly. "I was invited," he said calmly. The man scoffed, then faltered when no one joined his laughter. "And who are you supposed to be?" Silence stretched, thick and heavy. From somewhere behind them, a voice whispered urgently, "Don't ask that." The man paled, muttered something incoherent, and backed away, nearly colliding with a table in his haste to leave. Ava exhaled shakily, her grip tightening on the glass until her knuckles whitened. "What are they afraid of?" she asked. Ethan met her gaze fully, and for the first time that night, she saw something unguarded flicker in his eyes. "What they think I'm capable of." The answer sent a chill through her. Ava looked around the courtyard, at the carefully curated beauty, at the people pretending not to stare. She suddenly felt like she was standing on a fault line, one misstep away from collapse. Amber appeared beside them, her smile brittle, her movements too quick. "There you are," she said brightly. "Everyone's asking about you." Her gaze flicked to Ethan, then back to Ava. "We need to talk." "Not now," Ava replied quietly. "Please," Amber insisted, lowering her voice. "It's important," reluctantly. Ava stepped a few paces away, though she did not leave Ethan's side completely. Amber's composure cracked the moment they were out of earshot. "People are saying things," she whispered. "Things about him, about you." Ava felt a familiar ache, sharper this time. "People always say things. This is different," Amber said, her eyes glistening. "They think you're in danger?" Ava laughed softly, the sound hollow. "They thought I was fragile long before tonight." Amber reached for her hand, then hesitated, letting it fall. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said. I said something. I didn't think it would spread." Ava froze. "What did you say?" Amber swallowed. "That you were involved with someone dangerous? I thought it would make people stop looking at you like a victim." Tears spilled over. "I didn't know it would turn into this." The betrayal cut deeper than Ava expected. She had spent years protecting her sister from her own shadows, and now those shadows had been turned against her. Ava stepped back, her chest tight. "I trusted you," she said quietly. "I know." Amber sobbed. "I'm sorry." Ava turned away before she could say something she could not take back. She returned to Ethan's side, her expression carefully composed. "You're shaking," he observed. "I'll stop," she said, though she wasn't sure it was true. He leaned closer. His voice meant only for her. "We should leave." Ava hesitated, looking out at the vineyard, at the lights and the laughter that now felt hollow. Leaving would mean retreating. Staying meant facing whatever consequences had already begun to gather. Before she could decide, she felt it again, that subtle shift in the air. The sense of being watched. Ava's gaze swept the courtyard until it landed on Marcus, standing at the far edge, half hidden in shadow, his eyes locked onto hers, his smile slow and knowing. A warning. Ethan followed her line of sight, his body tensing. His hand settled firmly at her back, protective, instinctive. "Stay close," he murmured. Ava nodded, her heart racing. She did not know what Marcus planned, only that he was not finished. The whispers, the rumors, the fear, they were all threads tightening around her. As the night deepened, Ava understood something with chilling clarity. This was no longer about a wedding, or appearances, or even Ethan's past alone. It was about her now, about what she represented, about what she meant. And somewhere beyond the lights and flowers, the consequences of being seen were already moving toward her. The night did not explode into chaos the way Ava half expected it to. There were no raised voices, no shattered glasses, no dramatic confrontations beneath the string lights. Instead, the danger crept in quietly, disguising itself as normalcy. Music swelled again. Guests laughed a little too loudly. The wedding continued, determined to survive whatever unease had settled beneath its surface. Ava felt the pressure building anyway. She stood beside Ethan, his presence steady, grounding, but the space inside her chest felt increasingly tight. Amber's confession echoed in her mind, every word cutting deeper the longer she sat with it. The rumors, the whispers, the way her sister had tried to protect her by turning her into something people would fear instead of pity. Ava had spent years trying not to be a burden. Tonight, she felt like one again. "I need air," she said softly. Ethan turned toward her immediately. "I'll come with you." She shook her head. "Just a minute." He hesitated, his gaze searching her face. "Don't go far. I won't." She promised, though she wasn't sure what that meant anymore. She moved away from the courtyard, following a narrow stone path that curved between rows of darkened vines. The music faded behind her, replaced by the quiet hum of night insects and the distant murmur of celebration. The vineyard felt vast and empty without the lights, shadows stretching long across the ground. Ava breathed deeply, trying to slow the pounding of her heart. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine leaving, slipping away quietly, calling a car, returning to the familiar solitude of her apartment, where no one watched her too closely and no one expected anything of her. The thought brought a sharp ache of relief and something else, heavier, more painful, disappointment. She leaned against a low stone wall, pressing her palm flat against its cool surface. Her whole life, she had been careful Careful with space. Careful with hope. Careful with attachment. And yet, in the span of a single evening, Ethan had disrupted all of it simply by standing beside her as though she belonged there. It terrified her. You shouldn't be alone. The voice came from behind her, smooth and unmistakably unwelcome. Ava turned slowly. Marcus stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed as if they were meeting under perfectly ordinary circumstances. Without the lights of the reception, his expression was harder to read, his eyes darker, sharper. I told you to stay away from me, Ava said, her voice steadier than she felt. He smiled faintly. I told Ethan the same thing once. She stiffened. What do you want to talk? He replied, without him listening. I don't owe you anything. No, Marcus agreed. But he does. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Ava's instinct screamed at her to leave, to turn back toward the light and the safety of familiar faces. Instead, she stood her ground, lifting her chin. Say what you came to say, she said. Then go. Marcus studied her with something like curiosity. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Ava asked. Someone easier to break. A chill traced her spine. You don't know me? I know enough, he said calmly. I know he chose you, and I know what that costs. Ava swallowed. You talk about him like he's a weapon. Marcus's smile faded. The honesty in his voice unsettled her more than threats would have. Ava took a step back, putting distance between them. Whatever happened between you and Ethan is not my responsibility. Marcus tilted his head. That's where you're wrong. Before Ava could respond, a distant voice called her name. Ethan. Her heart lurched with relief and dread. Marcus's gaze flicked toward the sound, then back to her. He won't tell you the whole truth, he said quietly. He thinks he's protecting you. From what Ava demanded. From himself. Footsteps approached rapidly. Ethan emerged from the shadows, his expression tight, his attention immediately locking onto Marcus. The air shifted, tension snapping into place like a live wire. Step away from her, Ethan said. Marcus raised his hands in mock surrender. Relax, we're just talking. I warned you, Ethan replied, his voice low. Marcus's eyes gleamed. And I warned you what would happen if you brought her into this. Ava felt caught between them, the weight of their shared history pressing in. Enough, she said sharply. Both of you. They turned to her in unison. I am not a bargaining chip, Ava continued, her hands trembling but her voice firm. Whatever this is between you, I didn't ask for it. Ethan's expression softened immediately. I know. Marcus, however, smiled. That's the problem. You didn't ask, and yet here you are. He took a step back, retreating toward the darkness. Enjoy the rest of the night, he added lightly. It won't last. Then he was gone, swallowed by the shadows of the vineyard. Ava released a shaky breath. Ethan moved closer, his hand hovering near her arm, careful not to touch unless she invited it. Are you okay? I don't know, she admitted. You shouldn't have been alone, he said quietly. Ava looked at him, really looked at him, at the tension in his shoulders, the restraint in his gaze, the unspoken guilt that seemed to cling to him like a second skin. I can't do this, she said suddenly. His brow furrowed. Do what? Stand in the middle of things I don't understand, she replied. Be the reason people threaten each other in whispers? Ethan's jaw tightened. If you want to leave, I do, Ava said. The word came out sharper than she intended, not because of fear, because I need to breathe, and right now, I can't. The admission hurt more than she expected. She had not meant to push him away. She had meant to protect herself. Ethan nodded slowly. I'll have a car brought around. No, Ava said, stepping back. I'll go on my own. The distance between them felt suddenly vast. Ethan watched her for a long moment, then inclined his head. If that's what you need. Ava turned and walked away, back toward the lights of the reception, her steps steady despite the ache in her chest. She did not look back. She did not see the way Ethan's gaze followed her until she disappeared into the crowd. She did not see Marcus watching from the shadows, a satisfied smile on his lips. And she did not know that by choosing to walk away on her own, she had stepped directly into the most dangerous moment of the night. Ava moved through the reception with practiced composure, the kind she had perfected over years of being quietly out of place. Smiles greeted her again, uncertain and polite, but she did not stop to answer questions or acknowledge curious glances. The lights felt harsher now, the music too loud, every sound pressing against her skin. She focused on one thing only, leaving without drawing attention. She found Amber near the dance floor, laughing too brightly, champagne in hand. Ava touched her arm lightly. "I'm going," she said. Amber blinked, confusion breaking through her expression. "Already, yes." Guilt flickered across Amber's face. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "About earlier. I never wanted to hurt you." Ava nodded, though the apology felt unfinished. Fragile. "We'll talk later," she replied. It was not a promise. It was simply the only thing she could say. She turned away before Amber could respond, weaving through the crowd toward the edge of the courtyard. The path back to the vineyard lay ahead, dimly lit and quiet. Ava welcomed the darkness. It felt honest. Her phone vibrated in her hand. One message. No name. You shouldn't leave alone. Her heart stuttered. Ava stopped walking, scanning the shadows instinctively. The vineyard stretched wide and empty, rows of vines dissolving into darkness. She typed back with trembling fingers. "Who is this?" The response came almost immediately. "Someone who's trying to keep you alive." A chill crept up her spine. Ava considered turning back, finding Ethan, asking for an explanation she was not sure she was ready to hear. But pride and fear tangled together, rooting her in place. She hated the idea of needing protection. She hated even more the idea that she might. She slipped her phone into her clutch and continued toward the parking area. The night air grew cooler as she moved farther from the lights. Her heels clicked softly against stone, the sound unnervingly loud in the quiet. Ava's senses sharpened, every rustle of leaves setting her nerves on edge. She reached the edge of the vineyard path when footsteps sounded behind her. Ava turned, her breath catching. "Ethan," she called. No answer. The footsteps stopped. Ava took a step back, her pulse racing. "This isn't funny," she said, forcing steadiness into her voice. A figure emerged from the shadows, not Ethan. A man she did not recognize, dressed plainly, his expression unreadable. Another shape shifted behind him. Ava's instinct screamed. She turned to run. A hand caught her arm. She gasped, struggling, panic surging as strong arms restrained her. The world tilted violently. Her clutch fell to the ground, its contents scattering uselessly across the stone. "Let me go," she cried. A sharp pain bloomed at her side, brief and blinding. The fight drained out of her limbs almost instantly. Her knees buckled as darkness crept in from the edges of her vision. The last thing Ava heard was a familiar voice murmuring calmly, "Easy now. This doesn't have to hurt." Then everything went black. Ethan knew something was wrong the moment he couldn't see her anymore. He scanned the courtyard, heart pounding, his instincts screaming. Ava should have been visible, easy to find. She never disappeared into crowds the way others did. When he didn't see her near the exit, unease turned sharp and immediate. He moved quickly, weaving through guests with clipped apologies. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A single message. "She's alone." Ethan didn't need to ask who sent it. He broke into a run. The vineyard swallowed sound, the path eerily quiet as he followed it toward the parking area. He spotted Ava's clutch first, lying abandoned near the stone wall. The sight hit him like a physical blow. "Ava!" he called, his voice tight. No answer. He crouched, fingers brushing the ground where she had fallen. A faint smear of blood. His jaw clenched, fury and fear colliding violently. Marcus stepped out of the shadows. "I warned you," Marcus said calmly. Ethan surged forward, grabbing him by the collar and slamming him against the stone wall. "Where is she?" Marcus didn't resist. He smiled, slow and knowing. "Safe," he said. "For now." Ethan's grip tightened. "If you touched her, I didn't," Marcus replied evenly. "I wouldn't risk damaging what I need." "What you need," Ethan snarled. "You," Marcus said simply, "the version of you that stopped pretending he could walk away." Ethan released him abruptly, stepping back. His hands shook, though whether from rage or dread he could not tell. "You've crossed a line," Marcus shrugged. "You crossed it first. Years ago." Ethan stared at him, realization dawning with cold clarity. "This isn't about revenge." "No," Marcus agreed. "It's about proof. Proof of what, that you're still willing to burn the world for someone you care about." Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice. "If you want her back, you know where to find me." He slipped past Ethan and vanished into the vineyard, leaving behind a silence heavy with consequence. Ethan stood alone beneath the dark sky, Ava's absence like a wound he could not ignore. The restraint he had fought to maintain for years shattered completely. This time, he would not choose mercy. And wherever Ava was, the night had only just begun. Ava woke to darkness and the steady rhythm of her own breathing. For a few disorienting seconds, she thought she was still dreaming, suspended in that fragile space between sleep and memory. Then the ache bloomed sharp at her side, dull in her head, and reality rushed back with brutal clarity. Her wrists were bound, not painfully tight, but firm enough to make escape impossible. The air smelled of dust and metal, old oil and damp stone. Somewhere nearby, water dripped at an unhurried pace, each sound stretching the silence thinner. Ava lay still, fighting the instinct to panic. Panic wasted energy. Panic made mistakes. She tested her surroundings with small movements, gauging distance and space. Concrete beneath her, a chair, a low ceiling. This wasn't a place designed for comfort. It was designed for waiting. "You're awake." The voice came from the shadows, calm and unhurried. Ava's heart lurched, but she forced herself to lift her head slowly. Marcus stepped into view, his expression neutral, almost thoughtful. "How long?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "Long enough," he replied. Not long enough for him to stop looking. The mention of Ethan tightened something in her chest. "This won't work," Ava said quietly. "Whatever you think you're proving." Marcus smiled faintly. "That's what everyone says before they understand the rules." He pulled a chair closer and sat across from her, elbows resting casually on his knees. There was no hurry in him, no cruelty for cruelty's sake. That frightened her more than anger would have. "Why me?" Ava asked. "Me, Ava." Marcus considered the question. "Because you matter," he said simply. "And because he believes he can protect you without becoming what he used to be. And you want to show him he's wrong." "Yes." The honesty unsettled her. Ava swallowed, steadying her breath. "You could have taken anyone." "But I didn't," Marcus replied. "I took you." Silence settled between them, heavy and deliberate. Ava stared at the floor, then back at him. "If you wanted him to come, you didn't need to hurt me." Marcus's gaze sharpened. "I didn't hurt you. You drugged me. I spared you fear," he countered. "That's more mercy than most people get." Ava laughed softly, the sound brittle. "You and I have very different definitions of mercy." Marcus leaned back, studying her as if she were a puzzle. "You're calmer than I expected. I've spent most of my life being underestimated." Ava said, "Fear doesn't look dramatic on me. It never has." Something flickered in his expression. "Interest. Perhaps. You think that makes you strong? I think it makes me honest." Footsteps echoed faintly somewhere beyond the room, distant and purposeful. Ava's pulse quickened. Marcus noticed immediately. "He's close," Marcus said. "Good." Ava's stomach twisted. "You're enjoying this. I'm finishing something," he corrected. "Elsewhere." Ethan moved through the night like a force unrestrained. The restraint he had spent years cultivating was gone, stripped away by the image of Ava's abandoned clutch and the smear of blood on stone. He followed instinct more than logic, his mind already mapping the places Marcus would choose isolated, defensible, symbolic. He didn't call for backup. He didn't alert anyone who might slow him down. This was not a negotiation. This was a reckoning. When he reached the warehouse, its outline looming dark against the night sky, Ethan did not hesitate. He entered without announcement, the silence inside thick and expectant. His footsteps echoed, measured and unhurried, every movement deliberate. Marcus heard him before he saw him. He stood as Ethan entered the room, positioning himself between Ava and the doorway. "You're late," Marcus said lightly. Ethan's gaze went straight to Ava. Relief hit him hard and fast when he saw she was conscious, breathing, alive. His jaw tightened with fury he barely contained. "Let her go," Ethan said. Marcus laughed softly. "You didn't come all this way to ask." Ethan took a step forward. "This ends now." "It ends when you admit the truth," Marcus replied. "That you never stopped being what you are." Ava watched them, the air between them charged with years of unspoken history. She could see it now, the familiarity beneath the hostility, the shared language of people who had once trusted each other completely. "This isn't about me," Ava said, cutting through the tension. Both men turned toward her. "It is now," Marcus replied. "No," Ava insisted. "It's about control, about forcing him to choose." Marcus smiled. "Exactly." Ava's voice steadied as something resolute settled inside her. "Then listen carefully. Because I'm choosing too." She met Ethan's gaze, unwavering. "If you hurt him to save me," she said quietly, "you become what he wants you to be." Ethan's breath hitched. Ava. And if you don't come for me, she continued, you lose me anyway. The words hung between them, heavy and irrevocable. Marcus tilted his head, intrigued. She understands the game. Ava's hands clenched against the bindings. This isn't a game. It's a test. And you're terrified of the answer. Marcus's smile faltered for the first time. Ethan took another step forward, his voice low and controlled. You don't get to decide who I am. Marcus's eyes hardened. Prove it. The tension snapped. Ethan moved with lethal precision, closing the distance in seconds. Marcus met him head-on, the clash brutal and unforgiving. The sound of impact echoed through the room, sharp and final. Ava cried out, struggling against her restraints as the two men collided. Years of anger and betrayal unleashed in a flurry of motion. Ethan fought with restraint he could barely maintain, each strike measured, each movement deliberate. Marcus fought with nothing held back. When it ended, Marcus staggered back, blood at the corner of his mouth, eyes blazing with something close to satisfaction. There it is, Marcus breathed. You never lost it. Ethan stood over him, chest heaving, his hands trembling. I didn't lose myself, he said hoarsely. I chose something else. He turned immediately to Ava, crossing the room in 3 strides. His hands shook as he untied her wrists, his touch reverent. Careful. I'm here, he said, his voice breaking. Ava sagged against him, relief flooding her system all at once. She pressed her forehead to his chest, breathing him in. I know. Behind them? Marcus laughed weakly. You think this is over? Ethan didn't look back. It is for you. As they left the warehouse together, Ava felt the night air hit her skin, cool and sharp. She didn't know what waited beyond this moment, what consequences, what truths, but she knew one thing with aching certainty. Fear had found her, and she had survived being seen. The drive away from the warehouse passed in a tense, fragile quiet. Ava sat in the passenger seat, wrapped in Ethan's jacket, its weight grounding her as the city lights slid past in blurred streaks. Her hands still trembled faintly, though the worst of the fear had receded, replaced by a deeper ache she could not name. Survival brought clarity, but it also demanded answers. Ethan drove with both hands locked on the wheel, his posture rigid, his attention split between the road and the woman beside him. He glanced at her every few seconds, as if confirming she was still real, still there. Ava noticed. She did not comment. You don't have to take me home yet, she said softly. His jaw tightened. You need rest. I need honesty, she replied, and I don't think I can sleep without it. The car slowed at a red light. Ethan exhaled, long and controlled. Then we won't pretend this can wait. He drove past her apartment and continued toward the edge of the city, where the streets grew quieter and the buildings fewer. When he finally stopped, it was in front of a minimalist house overlooking the river, all clean lines and dark glass. It felt deliberately isolated. Inside, the space was immaculate, almost stark. Ava sat on the edge of the couch while Ethan poured water with hands that still shook slightly. He handed her the glass without speaking, then sat across from her, leaving a careful distance between them. Start from the beginning, Ava said. Ethan stared at the floor for a moment, gathering himself. I used to run things, he began. Not businesses, people. Decisions that ended lives, even when I didn't pull the trigger myself. His voice remained steady, but Ava sensed the effort behind it. Marcus and I were partners. We believed loyalty justified everything. And then Ava asked, and then I hesitated. He said, once. It was enough. He told her about the choice he had made years ago, the order he refused to give, the chain of consequences that followed, how mercy had been seen as betrayal, how walking away had cost lives he could never reclaim. Ava listened without interrupting, her heart heavy, but her gaze unwavering. That's why they fear you, she said quietly. That's why they think I'm dangerous, he corrected. Because they know what I'm capable of when I stop caring who I become? Ava set the glass aside, and tonight Ethan looked at her, his eyes dark and honest. Tonight, I came closer than I have in years. The admission landed hard. Ava felt the weight of it press against her ribs. You didn't lose control, she said. You stopped before it went too far. Because you asked me to, he replied. If you hadn't, but I did, she said gently. And that matters. Silence stretched between them, not awkward, but dense with unspoken emotion. Ava rose slowly, crossing the space until she stood in front of him. Ethan did not move. "I need you to understand something," she said. "Being taken didn't break me. Being lied to would—" His breath hitched. "I won't lie to you." "Then don't hide either," she said. "Not parts of yourself. Not the ugly ones." Ethan stood, the distance between them narrowing until Ava could feel the heat of him. He lifted a hand, hesitated, then let it fall back to his side. "If you stay," he said quietly, "you'll always be a target." Ava met his gaze without flinching. "I've been a target my whole life. People just didn't realize it." The honesty in her words surprised them both. Ava felt something settle into place, a calm resolve born of survival rather than bravado. She was tired of shrinking, tired of pretending that safety meant invisibility. "I won't ask you to protect me by pushing me away," she continued. "And I won't let you use me as a reason to destroy yourself." Ethan closed his eyes briefly, as if steadying himself. When he opened them again, there was something raw in his expression. "I don't deserve you." "That's not your decision," Ava said softly. "It's mine." The space between them dissolved. Ethan reached for her carefully, his touch tentative despite the strength beneath it. Ava leaned into him, her forehead resting against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. The moment was quiet, intimate, and profoundly fragile. "I was invisible before tonight," Ava whispered. "Not just to others, to myself." Ethan's arms wrapped around her, firm and protective without being possessive. "You were never invisible," he said. "You just weren't looking at yourself the way you deserved." They stood like that for a long time, breathing together, the world narrowed to the rhythm they shared. Ava knew this was not the end of their troubles. Marcus might be gone for now, but the consequences of Ethan's past would not disappear so easily. Love, she realized, was not the absence of danger. It was the willingness to face it honestly. When Ava finally pulled back, her expression was resolute. "I'm not leaving," she said. "Not tonight. Not like this." Ethan searched her face, then nodded slowly. "Then we face what comes next together." Outside, the river reflected the city lights in fractured patterns, beautiful and imperfect. Ava watched them for a moment, then turned back to Ethan, a quiet certainty blooming in her chest. She had been taken into darkness and brought back by choice, not force, and now, standing in the aftermath, she understood the truth she could no longer ignore. Loving him would never be safe, but choosing herself had never been safer than this. Morning arrived quietly, almost cautiously, as if the world itself were unsure how to proceed after the night that had nearly shattered them. Pale light filtered through the tall windows of Ethan's house, tracing soft lines across the floor. Ava woke slowly, the events of the past hours returning not in fragments, but as a steady, undeniable truth. She was alive, she was safe, and nothing could ever return to the way it had been. Ethan was already awake. She sensed him before she saw him, seated at the far end of the room, a mug cooling untouched in his hands. He looked as though he hadn't slept at all. The sharpness of the night before had faded, replaced by something heavier reflection, perhaps, or the weight of consequences he could no longer postpone. "You should have rested more," he said quietly when he noticed her watching him. "So should you," Ava replied. She sat up slowly, aware of every bruise, every lingering ache. None of them frightened her. Pain felt honest compared to the fear she had already survived. She wrapped the blanket tighter around herself and met his gaze. "What happens now?" she asked. Ethan leaned back, exhaling. "That depends on what you want." The answer surprised her, though it shouldn't have. He had given her that choice before, even when it hurt him to do so. Ava rose and crossed the room, stopping a careful distance away. "I'm not asking about logistics," she said. "I'm asking about us." Silence settled between them, not strained, but deliberate. Ethan stood, closing the distance only slightly. "If you stay with me," he said, choosing each word carefully, "my past won't stop chasing us. Marcus may be dealt with, but the world I came from doesn't forgive easily. And if I leave," Ava asked. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then I spend the rest of my life knowing I let you walk away because I was afraid." The honesty in his voice made her chest ache. Ava studied him, the man who had terrified a room without raising his voice, who had crossed lines he swore never to cross again just to reach her. She saw the danger. Yes, but she also saw the restraint. The effort, the quiet determination to be better than the stories told about him. "I won't be hidden," she said firmly. "Not from the world, not from your past, and not from myself." Ethan nodded. "I wouldn't ask you to be." "And I won't stay if I become your weakness," she continued. "I won't be the reason you destroy everything you worked to leave behind." "You're not my weakness," he said. "You're the reason I stop." The words settled between them, heavy and sincere. Ava felt something inside her loosen, a tension she hadn't realized she was still holding. Later that day, Ava returned to her apartment with Ethan at her side. The city felt different now, less indifferent, more watchful. News traveled fast in certain circles. Names were whispered, doors quietly closed. Ethan handled it all with calm efficiency, drawing boundaries without violence, making it clear that some lines would no longer be crossed. Amber called, her voice thick with guilt and fear. Ava met her in person instead. "I never meant for any of this to happen," Amber said through tears. "I thought if people were afraid, they wouldn't pity you." "I don't need fear or pity," Ava replied gently. "I need honesty." Amber nodded, ashamed. "Can you forgive me?" Ava considered the question carefully. Forgiveness, she had learned, wasn't a single moment. It was a process. "I'm not there yet," she said truthfully, "but I'm willing to try." It was enough for now. Days passed, then weeks. Life began to settle into a new rhythm, one built on truth rather than avoidance. Ava started physical therapy again, not because she needed fixing, but because she wanted strength on her own terms. She chose a new prosthetic arm, sleek and unapologetic, refusing to disguise it as something it wasn't. The first time she walked into a room without hiding it, her hands shook, but she didn't look away. Ethan watched her with quiet admiration. One evening, as the city lights flickered on below the balcony, Ava stood beside him, her fingers resting lightly against the railing. "I used to think happiness meant being left alone," she said softly. "And now," Ethan asked, "now I think it means being seen. And staying anyway." He turned toward her, emotion clear in his eyes. "I don't want to promise you safety," he said. I don't want safety," Ava replied. "I want choice." Ethan reached into his pocket, not dramatically, not ceremoniously. He held out a small, simple ring, its design understated, deliberate. "Then choose me," he said. "Not because you were pulled into my world, but because you want to build one with me." Ava stared at the ring, then at him. The girl who once stood outside every frame, careful not to take up space, felt impossibly distant now. She thought of the night she had been taken, of the fear that had nearly swallowed her, and of the strength she had found by refusing to disappear. She smiled, slow and certain. "I already did." Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands steady. He pulled her into his arms, not as a shield, not as a claim, but as a promise made in full awareness of its cost. Below them, the city carried on unaware, relentless, alive. Ava leaned into him, her heart steady, her future no longer a question mark, but a path she had chosen for herself. The past still lingered at the edges, but it no longer defined the shape of her life. They were not finished yet, but they were ready. And for the first time, the ending no longer felt like an escape. It felt like a beginning. The wedding was nothing like the one that had first brought Ava and Ethan together. There were no vineyards heavy with expectation, no guests whispering behind raised glasses, no unspoken tension hiding beneath elegance. This ceremony was smaller, quieter, and unmistakably intentional. Every detail existed because they chose it to exist. Morning sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the restored townhouse overlooking the river. White curtains moved gently in the breeze, softening the sharp edges of the city beyond. Ava stood alone for a moment, breathing in the stillness. She wore a simple dress, tailored not to conceal, but to honor her body as it was. Her prosthetic arm was visible, elegant in its design, metal catching the light without apology. She did not hide it. She never would again. For years, she had learned to stand at the edge of rooms, to leave space for others, to fold herself smaller so the world would feel more comfortable. Today, she stood at the center of her own life, grounded and unafraid. When the doors opened, there was no dramatic music, just silence, followed by the quiet sound of footsteps. Ava walked forward steadily, her gaze lifted, her expression calm. Every step felt like a declaration not of perfection, but of presence. Ethan waited at the front, his posture relaxed but alert, as if part of him would always be watchful. The difference now was that the vigilance no longer ruled him. It served him. He wore a dark suit, unadorned, his expression open in a way few people had ever seen. The man who once commanded fear without effort now looked at Ava with something gentler and infinitely stronger. Relief. As she reached him, his breath hitched almost imperceptibly. "You're here," he murmured. "I always was," Ava replied softly. The officiant spoke, words flowing easily, but Ava barely heard them. Her focus was on the steady warmth of Ethan's hand in hers, the certainty of it. When it came time for vows, neither of them reached for rehearsed promises. Ethan spoke first. "I can't promise you a life untouched by shadows," he said, "but I promise I will never ask you to disappear to make my life easier. I will stand beside you, not in front of you, and I will choose you every day, even when it costs me." Ava felt tears sting her eyes, but her voice did not waver when she spoke. "I promise not to shrink myself to protect your past, or my fear. I promise to meet you as I am, fully and honestly, and to walk forward without hiding. With you." When they exchanged rings, the metal felt cool against Ava's skin, grounding her in the moment. The kiss that followed was unhurried, intimate, witnessed only by those who had earned the right to be there. Later, as the celebration unfolded, laughter replaced formality. There was food, warm and familiar, music that invited movement rather than performance. Ava danced without self-consciousness, her body moving freely, joy evident in every step. Ethan watched her with a quiet smile, pride and awe mingling in his gaze. Amber approached cautiously, her expression softer than Ava remembered. "You look happy," she said. "I am," Ava replied. There was no bitterness in her voice, only truth. Amber nodded, emotion tightening her throat. "I'm glad," she whispered. As evening settled in, Ava and Ethan stepped out onto the balcony overlooking the river. The city lights reflected in fractured patterns across the water, imperfect and beautiful. Ava leaned against the railing, the cool metal grounding her once more. "I used to think being seen was dangerous," she said quietly, like it meant inviting judgment. And now, Ethan asked. "Now I know it means inviting connection," she replied, "and choosing what matters." He wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. There was no tension in his touch, no need to guard or control, just presence. The past did not vanish that night. It never would. But it no longer dictated the shape of their future. Boundaries had been drawn. Choices had been made. The world Ethan once belonged to understood now that some things were no longer within its reach. Ava rested her head against his shoulder, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. She thought of the woman she had been, the one who stood outside the frame, who learned to disappear so others wouldn't look too closely. That woman felt distant now, like a version of herself she had outgrown. "I don't feel invisible anymore," she said. Ethan kissed her temple. "You never were. You just hadn't claimed your space yet." Below them, the city carried on messy, loud, alive. Ava watched it with a sense of calm she had never known. She was not protected from life. She was part of it, hand in hand. They stood together as the night deepened, not because the world had become safe, but because they had become certain. This was not a fairy tale that erased scars. It was a love that honored them, and for Ava, that was the happiest ending she could imagine.